We're not live.
But we are here.
We are
And
here, not live, but we are here. It's just the last couple of weeks, I don't know what it is. We have been having issues getting on YouTube, and then we have like 15-second roundups. So it's nice to know that people are watching this and wanting to know what happens because, as we have such amazing and valuable things to say. So I'm going to pitch it right to you, Carol, because you have had, this is like, yeah, this does happen.
Yeah, so it came up this week with a client. She sent me a screenshot of an email that she was like, do you think this is a scam or not? And, it was somebody who was interested in paying for a private class. His daughters are getting ready for a wedding, but he couldn't talk on the phone because he had like auditory issues. So, could we just keep talking via email? And to me, I was, the first thing I asked her, I'm like, what does the email address look like? Because to me, that's always one of the telltale signs when it has like weird numbers and letters and but it was a very normal looking email address to me. And I had never seen this as a scam. So I was like, I don't know, and then Terry saw some of the conversations that we're having in Slack and she goes, I've seen this before. Total scam. In Terry's very Terry way. And so, but the studio owner was like, let me follow it through a little bit further. And this morning we got the follow-up that it was a total scam. The guy wanted to write some kind of like cashier's check or something. And that there it is. And I guess the scam is they ask for a return on the check before you even get the money, and so there they are. They have like the few $100s that they were going to pay for private class. So, has this ever happened to you guys? How do you identify a scam? Yeah, let's talk about it.
Well, when I just happened to see the message, I immediately, because I had that happen at least like once a year. I would get an email, same thing. The first time I really I was like, oh, it was early on in my studio ownership days. I'm like, yeah, I'll take this extra income. And in this case, the man wanted to have like a series of private lessons over like a series, like I think it was like over the summer is what I seem to recall. It was like, yeah, coming into summer, going to be visiting visiting the area, wanted his daughter, same thing, his daughters and his wife were very much, but yet they wanted to prefer to have a private class. And so I went back and forth and quoting and then it was the same thing. It just got stranger. And finally I was just like, well, probably the best thing is why don't you just come to one of our public classes? You could do our intro offer. And then he was like, no. And then finally I was just like, after chasing it down, I was just like, this isn't for real. This isn't for real. And then after that, every time I would get one like that, I would just block it. I wouldn't even respond. But what are the telltale signs? Like you said, I think you said that the cat said that her husband is a lawyer and he read it.
Her husband is an attorney. Yeah. And yeah, it was the cashier check angle. He was like, oh yeah, this is how they sort of get their money.
Right, because the cash doesn't, they get the check, you go to deposit it. It takes a while for it to clear.
Longer lag time with that one.
Yeah, and the lag time, it's called the float, actually.
Yeah.
Hashtag Terry's dad, work the float. Work the float.
Got it.
Talk about that in a second. But so that it's like there's a float time between when you deposit the check. Nowadays, it's much less than it used to be. Back in the day, it could take up to 10 days for a check to clear, but now they can clear pretty quickly. But anyway, so in that time, they request a refund.
Yeah.
You get the refund and then the check is bad.
Yeah.
So I like to say, sometimes the adage, if it looks too good to be true. I see you shaking your head, Bridget.
Yeah. I think this is so important, and it's really about teaching like internet literacy. And there's so many different scams that come up all the time. And in all the different forums I'm in, people are always like, is this a scam? And it's like, if you're asking, almost, I would say like, I've never seen anyone post, is this a scam? And it wasn't a scam. So if you're asking, I think that's like a really good trick. And then some of the scams, there's so many scams that are like, oh, we're Meta, we're Facebook, and we're telling you, and people still don't know about that one. And that's a really important one. So some of the things that I check for all of these kinds of things are the email address, like Carol said, especially if they're purporting to be some sort of company. If they're saying their name is Meta, then their email address should be meta.com. Like, and again, but also Meta's never going to email you. So just don't worry about that. Like, it's just never going to happen. And they're never going to like have one of their individual employees message you on Messenger. That's also never going to happen. The other really important thing, I think, when it's like purporting to be something official is there weird grammar or spelling mistakes in the email? Again, Meta is one of the most gigantic companies in the entire world. They do not make spelling mistakes or weird grammatical errors in their communications. That's crazy. Like that would never happen. And then in terms of the kinds of scams that that this particular client was talking about, I totally think what Terry said about if it's too good to be true. If you're just like, oh my God, someone just wants to give me hundreds and hundreds of dollars to do this like really fun sounding thing, just like probably not. And then they love to talk about their daughters and wives. That's a big like red flag, is if they start talking about their daughters and wives. And then unfortunately, the auditory issue is a big red flag. I know people with auditory issues. I know deaf people. They would just have someone else, like if that truly needed to happen, they could have someone else reach out and talk to you on the phone. Like it's just like that's just that is the scam, And so those are just a couple things.
Because there's also what is it, TD? I mean, like if you are hearing impaired or deaf or whatever it is, auditory. There's services out there that you can connect, right? That you, like AT&T used to have it, maybe they still do. So there are ways, it really is, you need to talk to someone. There's plenty of technology out there nowadays where you could actually do that. And that's what you said. It's like our spidey senses, right? When you're like that little prickling at the base of the tailbone, that's our primordial tail curling in, right? It's like when you're like, oh, I mean, intuition is there for a reason, for sure. If you're like, I don't know. The other thing, like another big one, I'm going to take this off, it's getting hot, is the government, but this is a good one too, particularly for businesses. It's like you get something from the IRS or the Social Security Administration or anything like that. That's like, you've got to do this, give us, it's like, they'll never do that.
Call the cops on you. The IRS doesn't call the cops on you.
That's where you get the text or something. It's like if you don't pay, they're gonna 100%. The IRS doesn't call the cops. The IRS pretty much doesn't call you or text you or email you. They send you snail mail, right? And so it's like anything like that. If they're asking for your account number or your anything like that, it's like that should be like a huge red flag.
Or even like in an email where it's like, click this link to find out more, they're about to take over your phone right then, or take over your laptop and see your keystrokes, that's a little phishing expedition.
I just got one from Netflix saying that something was wrong with my account and my payment and this and that, click here to fix. I went spam, I scanned, it's like, no way. It's like, they're not going to say click here. It's like they'll say go to your account online. And so it's just like, you just got to be wary. Like I said, if it's too good to be true, it probably is.
That email though played on me. My son is deaf in one ear, and I was like, oh, if this is an older person and they haven't had services like my kid does, you know what I mean? Like, I was sort of like, well, maybe his grammar isn't great because he is hard of hearing or whatever. It's because there were mistakes in the email. Grammatical mistakes. So it can, they play on that for sure. So.
Well, and one time, the one I got, he said we're Muslim. And they played on that. It's like, my wife and daughters want to come, but because we're Muslim and blah, 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 and it going on about that. So then they're playing into that angle as well. And then again, I'm just like, good right is if you just ignore it, right? And then nothing happens. You're like, okay, yeah, this is a scam. Totally a scam. So be mindful. If you're unsure, check.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what would you guys say are some good, like, easy ways? Is it just you need to get someone on the phone? Like, is that what you would advise? Like, if you just want to be like 100% sure, would you just be like, we need to talk on the phone? But what if someone can talk on the phone and they're still scamming you?
Well, yes, let's talk on the phone about that. If they're unwilling, or say we can't, I mean, that should be a red flag. If they're asking you for information that is readily available, like on your website, or if they're unwilling to like even do like a public class, if they have some, like in the case of the man who was saying that they were Muslim, it's like, I know practicing Muslim women who still can take a yoga class, even a hot yoga class, right? And so it's like, those are some things. If they're asking for any like account information, I don't know, just things like that. Like I said, if your spidey sense is going off, yeah.
Yeah, and maybe just getting to the root of it right away. Like you could literally just say to them, hey, sorry, I don't mean to offend you, but this is like, we commonly get scams like this. How do you plan to pay? Because the only way we take payments is like through our credit card processor or whatever. Like there's no cashier's check. So if this is where this is going,
Yeah.
like
You probably won't hear back from
don't
them.
talk
That's
to
a
me
good point.
anymore.
Yeah, we only accept credit cards. Yeah, good.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Be aware.
Be
Stay
aware.
alert,
Be
friends.
aware. Totally. I mean, there's always, and every time they're always popping up.
Mm-hmm.
They're always popping up. So, so from that, this is sort of like the cautionary week, I guess. Carol had the scam. I had talked a little bit the other day about this on Spill the Booch, but I had I don't know if Mercury's in retrograde or what, but I've had this week 3 clients have had 3 really like not so great things happen, and everyone's like, how do you handle it? So full moon, yeah, it's a special moon, isn't it? I was reading something about that, yeah. So we were talking about, in one case, there was a person wandering around. The man came in, back book to book classes, using 2 different email addresses, which they realized afterwards, which obviously, you can do that. And then during Savasana in the second class, he fully exposed himself. And so the person, they did the right thing. They called the police, filed the report, all that kind of stuff. So that's just, we talked a lot about that the other day on Spill the Booch as an incident report, and then additionally had a client that had to yesterday terminate, fire a teacher. And it was because it had gotten way out of hand. It was a male teacher, and he was, something happened. We don't know. I mean, don't know his side of what he's going on in his life, but he blew up at several people. He sent the most incredibly disrespectful text to the owner, and some of the words could be read as threatening, the way it was worded. And so then the one woman he had called a effing bitch and a hoe, and just was totally inappropriate. So the owner had to fire him, obviously had to fire this person. So what do you do? How do you go about that in a situation like that? What is it that you do? Have you guys ever in that situation where it was more than just, oh, it's not working well, oh yeah, okay, thank you so much kind of situation, which is a fairly reasonable one. What do you do in a situation where you are dealing with something to this level of volatility? Is there such a word as volatility? I think there is. Yeah. Did you ever have that either one of you guys?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to? Yeah, I mean, I think it needs to be swift.
Yeah.
It needs to be, I mean, I think you had great advice to the studio owner where it's like have somebody with you.
Yep.
Regardless whether it's, a male teacher or a female, whatever. But like if you need to have somebody with you that can corroborate any stories that come up. I think there were some suggestions about recording what the exact words that happened and having that incident report where it's like this is exactly what happened. The rest of us can sign off on this as, this, as the truth as we see it.
Right.
And in this case, I know they changed the locks, but like, take the key, here's your last paycheck, and it's done, as quickly as possible. And yeah, it's unfortunate, but this is sometimes what has to happen in the studio. And I think that the result seems to be that the rest of the team is like exhaling, and very thankful to the studio owner for making that decision. And so, yeah, what about you, Bridget? Have you had to do anything like that?
Never to the extent that this studio owner was dealing with that. I just have like so much, just like my heart was so tender for her because it's just so upsetting when anyone speaks to you like that, especially someone who's like in your space and like such an integral part. And to be honest, even though I think that guy was a total like so out of line, I have a lot of compassion for him because imagine being that like out of control, So I have had a couple incidents where I did fire someone pretty much immediately after a conversation. One time a girl yelled at me, "I don't like you." And I was like, okay, thank you for sharing that with me. And then I walked away and I actually did not know at that point. I was like so activated. I didn't even know if I was going to let her go. And then I walked away and I had been like, obviously this had been like building. And I walked away and I called my mom, who's also my lawyer. And I was like, this happened. And she was like, Bridget, just fire her. Like you don't have to work with someone. And that is true. Like, obviously you want, it's best if you have a lot of documentation and can show that like this person repeatedly, did not meet the stated expectations, but you're also allowed to not work with someone in this country. And sorry, the United States, it's totally different in other countries. In the United States, check your specific state, but California, what do they call it? Like an
at-will
employer.
Work state. Yes.
Yes. You can fire someone who you just do not like working with. And there's been a couple other situations, and then I'm going to zip it, but a couple other situations, actually, Terry and I were working together. Terry was my coach when this happened, just with like a blow up with actually just like a few teachers who had sort of like formed a coalition. And looking back, I wish I would have fired every single one of them at that time. And yeah, I actually am not, I like rarely fired people. I usually think it's best to just figure out how to sort of like peacefully like make everybody see that the best way is like parting ways. But I actually do, looking back, wish a couple times that I had been quicker to end things with employees.
Yeah, and the adage, hire slow, fire fast. Right. And like you said, Bridget, a lot of states are what's called at-will work state. You don't have to have a reason. Where I know we've talked about this before, where a lot of times people get in trouble is like, your services are no longer needed, Carol. Here's your final paycheck. And Carol says, but why? And I say, well, you were late a few times. Boom. Now it's like you never told me. Right. As soon as you give that reason, my understanding is, from what I know of HR and stuff, and again, it's very dependent upon states, right? However, it's like you don't have to give a reason, but if you give a reason, then you need to have had it documented. So that's oftentimes what happens is you're not documenting if there's infractions of or violations of policy or procedure, something like that. And we're talking like low level stuff. What I mean low level is not like to this level of what my client had to deal with. If you're not documenting it, and then you tell them, well, it's because you were late again, and you're like, that can be wrongful termination. So that's when you want to say, okay, Carol, you get the written warning, you get the verbal warning, you get the written warning, happens one more time, you're out of here. However, if I just want to, like you said, fire someone, I can fire someone, just say your services are no longer needed. And that's all you have to say. And then they can come back. But it's like, that type of thing. Goodness, excuse me. And another piece of this is, in a situation like this, what do you say to your staff? What do you say to the community? Right? You need to be prepared for that. And it's, again, always just very simple, is that, Carol has decided to move in a different direction. She's decided to go on to the next chapter of her life. We wish her well. And that's all that needs to be said. And that's what you communicate. You tell the team. And in this case, it's like I messaged the owner. I said, how's the team doing? And she said, they're relieved he's gone, which tells me this was a problem that she wasn't really aware of in her studio, is that he was causing problems amongst the teachers. So there was like a collective, like you said, a collective exhale. So, when you are going to fire somebody, even if it's literally in the moment, when that's done, just make it, you don't have to get down into the details. In fact, I'd advise not to get into the details about why someone was fired, because again, that can get you in trouble. Right. And then, so just have that. And that's why you need to have ideally an onboarding process and an offboarding process, even in a situation like this. What's the process?
Yeah, definitely like talk to an employment lawyer about all of this and understand like the specifics of your state and and all that stuff is really important. That's why I called my lawyer afterwards. The other thing I was going to say, Terry, is like sort of the thread, I think, that connects sort of this more dramatic thing and some of the smaller stuff that I was talking about is like when you see that emotional instability, that emotional lack of emotional groundedness, emotional immaturity in an adult, like that's not typically something that's going to get better. Like that shows you, like, what does that Oprah say? Like when someone tells you who they are, believe them. That sort of thing is truly like I have come to think of as cancer to your team.
Oh yeah.
And so that initial text that your client's, employee sent, that was a huge red flag. It showed like what kind, would I ever say anything like that? No. And especially not in a professional environment. And that kind of lack of judgment, I think, is really hard to like help foster in an already grown person. And I think that that's the kind of fire fast sort of, that's where sort of that comes from.
Yeah. And I also think too, some of it coming, Carol, maybe you can speak to this as well, is somewhat of the fear factor of, oh my gosh, now I've got to get these classes covered. And in this studio, they have some 26 and 2. No, they're down to like just, I think, 3 weeks, so not a ton, but he was the only 26 and 2 teacher. And that was part of, I think, the thing is his numbers were going down. And we talked about that with the owner. I said to her, well, part of the problem is that you only have one teacher who teaches this one title class. So if a client doesn't like this person's class, not everybody's going to like everybody's class, then it's like, there's no other, that's it. They're not going to take that class. they're not going to come because they don't like the teacher. So there was already, so that was part of it. And he did teach like 12 classes a week. So that her fear was, oh my gosh, we talked through that. It's like, okay. And this is before some of this other stuff came out that led to her saying, yes, we're going to fire the dude. And it was fear. It was really just fear about how am I get these classes covered? I know his girlfriend's going to quit because his girlfriend had a membership. And she brought in some friends, so they'll probably quit. And so she was kind of in that fear based of losing revenue, having to get all these classes covered. And so kind of coming out of that. So again, and the other thing is you're keeping somebody because you're fearful for those things. That's like not a good reason to keep someone on staff. Carol.
Yeah. Well, what's coming up for me in this conversation is, it's kind of even in this sort of explosive sort of situation, it was still like, I need to fire him, don't I? Right. So we wait a lot of times until it's something really, really big. But we talk so many times with studio owners that have that feeling before it gets there. They already kind of know with the things like Bridget was saying, like sort of a lack of emotional intelligence or how to conduct yourself in a business. Like there are little things that have added. They keep, scratching at it a little bit, but they won't pull the trigger because of the fear. And I think another piece of this, what I'm trying to pull it back to is like, if you don't know about it, you can't do anything about it. So that's where having the incident reports and having a way for your team to not tell on each other, but you're not there the entire time. You don't know always that maybe this teacher said something to another teacher and it really made them uncomfortable. If you haven't fostered an environment where they can come to you, like that's sort of, I think, where we get to this like blow up point where then everyone's like, oh, thank God he's gone, So I would venture to guess if she had incident reports that her team had been able to fill out, we might have been able to see a pattern, and maybe it would have made it easier to fire or get rid of this person or part ways earlier before it affected. I mean, there were things said in front of students. So that's terrible. You don't ever want it to get there,
Well, it was interesting because in this case, one teacher said to another teacher that then made it back to the owner. It's kind of like he said telephone about, it was like, oh, they were like, oh, this one woman was like, oh, thank God he's gone. And then she said, well, maybe so-and-so will come back now. Yeah. Right. Which is like, obviously telling in that it sounds like this teacher left because of it was like, I'd rather just leave. He's here and maybe I teach 1 or 2 classes a week. It's like, it's not worth it. It's not worth the money. It's just like, and left. So my sense is after I heard that, after she shared that with me, is that I don't think she's going to have any problem getting his classes covered because it sounds like maybe a couple of teachers might even be willing to come back and, now that he's gone kind of thing. So that's, and I think, like you said, if this is right now how things stand at a studio like this, what do you feel, guys, are some things the owner can do so that we need to get something in place culturally so that this doesn't happen again? So what could, in a situation like this where all of a sudden all this shit is coming up that she was not aware of, how can someone in that situation change? What are some things this person could do to change that? What?
Yeah. I guess I'll like start with something kind of broader that's like a little harder. But if you are leading anyone, whether it's 1 employee, 20 employees, your kids, like whatever it is your job to continuously like become a more emotionally grounded person yourself. And when you have the energy of like, I can handle things, then people can come to you. people feel more comfortable coming to you. If you have the energy of, and I'm not at all saying that this
Right.
is the case with your client, Terry, but I know this from my own experience of being a less emotionally grounded leader in the past. And if you have an energy of like, oh my God, like I'm freaking out if something is going wrong, then people don't, I mean, like, I think a lot of us have experience with like parents like this, like you don't want to come to your parent and say, like, I messed up, or this really, this happened and it really scared me, because they're going to freak out.
Yeah.
So you having more and more emotional groundedness and showing that to your team, I think is really important. And then one of the ways you can just a little bit more practically do this, like we have, a group chat or whatever, and I'm actually, remote now. So I do this even more now that I'm never seeing them in person, but I just send a little message to the group, like maybe a couple times a month. And I just say, hey, I'm just checking in. Like, how is everyone? And I just want you all to know that, like, if anything ever comes up, if you want to talk about your career, if you want to talk about like things that are specifically going on at the studio, teaching, I am here. Let's set up a little like coffee Zoom date or whatever. I also have like open office hours Zoom calls like once a quarter where I just am there and I'm just like, come on by, like, pop in if you're free. So, and I think even if you are sort of in a space where you're still like building emotional groundedness, which I get, and I've been there, those are little things you can do in the meantime, like, just really try, to hold that space for them in just these little ways.
I like that idea of the remote office hours. I mean, and even if you're not running your studio remotely, that could be a thing. I don't know, I would occasionally go out with my team and stuff, but, say, hey, I'm at the studio, from this time to this time, come on by, or let's hang out, like be on a Zoom call. Carol, did you ever do that? I know you did I love your Monday Minutes, but that's a little different.
Yeah, Monday Minutes is more of a communication tool to get out to the team what's happening, what's going well, what could we improve on. But I felt like I was also there a lot at the studio, and so check-ins were more, face to face, like, hey, how's it going? Anything we need to talk about. And I always felt like we did have very open communication with the team. And not that we were, again, not trying to tattletale on anybody, but like we were clear, like if you see something, let us know. Like we can't make any changes unless, and it is not a tattletale. It's like if we need to correct behavior or need to train somebody better even, or whatever it is, please let us know, and we won't let them, they're not going to know that it was you that said anything. It's just like generally it's come up where we would make up some scenario as to how we found out about it, and then address the situation. And our incident reports were not only about like somebody maybe getting injured or, I guess something major like what happened with your studio owner this week, but also with behavior at the studio with an employee. We would say, this is what happened, this is what we saw, this is how we expect things to go in the future. Here are some action items for you. And we would have a meeting and they would sign off on it.
Yeah, I like that.
It was more like, look, we want to work with you. We love having you here. And this was an issue. Let's correct it. And that's sort of how, if we did need to let somebody go, they would probably know that it was coming because we've been working on whatever it was. And if it wasn't corrected, then they're more surprised, if it didn't work out.
Well, and that's what you laid that process out brilliantly. It's like, here's a behavior issue. We work with them. We document it. We hear the action. This is what we expect. They sign off on it. And this is where, when you get to that point, it's like, it becomes easy.
Yeah.
I mean, easy in air quotes. Nobody ever likes to fire. But at that point, it's like, you're just not, and it's usually the person knows it too. It's like, if they're not hitting something, a certain thing, or doing a certain thing, they know it as well. And oftentimes they might just end up quitting before you have to actually let them go. So yeah, so that's where having all those processes in place will really help you for sure. And also you can use the incident report if you have not just staff, but if a client is behaving erratically or something like that, so that you can document that as well. I mean, I'm sure we've all had to, exit people and ban people from our studio because of inappropriate behavior or or verbally abusive or things like that. So having those details as well, which is why in the two other instances this week and even yesterday actually, is call the police. Right. I know sometimes people are really hesitant to call the police about stuff like this, but the thing about calling the police is that when they show up, they take a report, right? You can get, in one case there that happened earlier this week, a woman was in at the studio and seemed fine and was something with her membership, and then went out in the parking lot and just lost it and was like banging on one of the instructor's cars and kicking it and just having like a complete emotional meltdown in the parking lot. And so the owner was debating whether or not to call the police. And then before she did, the woman got in her car and sped away. And so when she was asking me for advice, I said, well, you sound like you handled it appropriately. They locked the door and blah, blah, blah. I said, the only thing I would have done is I would have called the police. Because then, like I said, you can give a description of her car, the make, the model, who she is, and then you have a official document. You have a record of what happened, which can be important later down the road. And in the case of they did call the police with the person exposed themselves, and if you do feel that something's going to be a completely volatile situation with an employee, you can call the police and explain the situation. It's like oftentimes with like security people. So I guess I'm giving a little bit of a commercial for police. They can be your friends. And the reason I say this, Lieutenant Leslie, my younger sister, was a cop for 30 plus years. Right. And so it's like the police are there for the most part to help us. Yes, it's like anything. I'm sorry, I'm getting on my little soapbox here. But, they do really want to help people. So don't be afraid to call them, I guess is what I'm saying. I digress.
We had the non-emergency line on our phone list. So because usually, I mean, if like somebody injures themselves or something like that, but in those kind of gray areas, you're like, I feel a little unsafe, or I don't know. Like we used to have a Sprint store right next to our yoga studio, and it was a rough Sprint store. Like they had security guards, and there was one day that I did not feel safe, so I just called. It was like non-emergency. I'm like, I don't know. This guy's standing out here, and he's like, and they're like, yeah, we'll send somebody. They do want to help, but I didn't feel like it was emergency.
Yeah.
So that's why we kept it up there as an option for our team. Yep. So I don't know. We used that a few times to be sure.
And I always told my staff, I said, err on the side of caution. If you're unsure, call.
Yeah.
If you see someone lingering outside in the parking lot, if you see some suspicious behavior, call. We were at an on-site a couple, I guess it was the end of January, and there was some suspicious activity out front of the studio, and the owner called the non-emergency, and they're dealing drugs out of this car. Right? It was like, we get like, the car's been sitting there for a while, and like every 10 minutes someone's going in the car, and then they hang out and then they leave, and it's like and so it's like they called the police, and then the police came in and explained what was going on, and then several hours later, another because this city has bicycle patrols, so a police officer on a bike came by and said, hey, just following up, blah blah blah, and so yeah. If you need it, if you're feeling like, I'm not, again, Spidey sense. So I was just curious, team, if in this situation, and you're trying to like maybe rebuild trust with your team and rebuild after something like this, what could you do? What are some suggestions that someone could do to start sort of this rebuilding process with the team?
I mean, my sense is like, hey, does anyone, I would invite them to, I don't want this to ever happen again.
Yeah.
this was a really bad situation, and I felt like I wasn't aware that there was a lot of this stuff going on beforehand. So as a team, like, let's figure out how we prevent this from happening in the future. And I think that could, one, the team already sounds like they're feeling better, and I assume maybe have some higher respect now to the studio owner, because they feel protected in a way, and I think that goes a long way with the team. But like drawing them in and say, I never want this to happen again, and let's fix it, could be one route. So
Yeah. I think probably an apology is in order from, whether it's in this case or another case. I've absolutely apologized to my team. That specifically, actually, I recently apologized to them about a client that I had known was like it was like that line where you're like, she's being kind of a what, but no one has come to me and specifically said, like, I don't feel safe or I don't feel what, but ultimately, and do you know what? I'm embarrassed, but what I ended up making me kick her out was that she called me a bunch of names and said a bunch of shit, like behind my back, not to me, and like in front of other people, to my staff. And I was like, it shouldn't have taken that to happen to me. And of course, I hadn't heard it to that level about anyone else, or I would have, but I apologized. I said, I've known for a while that this person was, I don't use the word toxic typically, but just, and I don't think I used it in this case, but that's the vibe. And I'm really sorry if she made any one of you feel uncomfortable. And in fact, I know that she did. I'm very sorry that she did make you feel like unworthy, whatever. So I think that, one of the most delicate balances I have learned to strike, and have made so many mistakes along the way of learning this, is learning to apologize when necessary, but not fall on your sword and not sort of lose your authority as a leader. And I think if sometimes apologizing when you really don't need to can sort of dampen your authority and like your strength as a leader. And I do think that you should use them sparingly, honestly, which is probably a controversial opinion, but I think that you use apology sparingly, but when you do really owe one, then you should do one. So I think especially to any teachers that left the studio because of this person, and then you realizing maybe that they were like possibly abusive, then you should say, hey, would you ever consider coming back? I want to apologize to you. I didn't realize the extent of this situation and I should have checked in or whatever. So
Yeah, that's a really good point. I like that. Would you suggest, I'm getting a little free coaching from you guys here. I'm just, I'm trying to think about, obviously I like the idea of the apology, and like, we don't want this to happen again. So I want you to feel like you can come to me if there is an issue. I can't fix something if I'm not aware of what's going on, kind of thing. And maybe, would you do it individually at a team meeting? I don't want to be, make it like a kumbaya moment, but maybe in a case like this, it could be, I'm just thinking aloud here. It's like, would you think in something like this that you would call an all team meeting and just like talk it out? Or would it be better? I mean, I'm just trying to think of how the best in a situation like this, where it's obvious it was a problem, the owner didn't know, and now it's having to kind of do the cleanup after getting rid of the person. Yeah, I like the idea of apologies, but would a meeting be a good idea? Individual? I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there. What in the situation would you guys think?
My thought, it would be dependent on the team. Like if you have a lot of, excuse me, teachers that are not really involved in the situation, then it wouldn't make sense to bring them in. Of course, you don't want anybody to feel excluded either,
Right.
So I guess that would definitely be something the studio owner, I think, would have to feel out. And obviously with the people that had,
Or directly.
friends with us, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, because you're right. A lot of cases, depending on, how big the studio is and the staff and the number of classes, there could be teachers that, I mean, heck, we've gone to on-sites where all the teachers don't even know each other. Like some of the bigger studios, if you have 35, 40 teachers, and, they may never see everybody. So I think that's part of it too, is, how often did this person work with certain people? Obviously front desk for sure, the manager for sure. But I do think and this is where having like regular check-ins and meetings with your team is a good thing as well, right? And then having that, like I love, like you said, you check in with them, the open office hours, where you can you're there from this time to this time, and if you have anything you'd like to talk about, anything, just join me, call me, whatever.
Yeah, I think Carol's point of like maybe leaving or, like not bringing everyone in, like reminds me that like you don't want to escalate
Yes.
an already existing drama by being like, everybody in, let me tell you every detail. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Like cry, like don't escalate the drama, deal with what you have to do. In the case of this member that I had to fire, I did send a group text. I was like, hey, just so you know, this person isn't welcome at our studio anymore. She won't be coming around. I'm really sorry. And if anyone needs to process like anything that happened between you and this person, I'm totally here for it. And then I spoke to a couple specific teachers about it. But yeah, I think that's a good point, Carol. Like if people didn't have any, then you're sort of coming off as like a little bit of a drama, like queen of just sort of coming in here and being like everybody in. So I think that's a good point.
Yeah. That is a very good point. And then just moving forward, just hire slow. I mean, hire slow. It's even if, I know I made mistakes is quickly wanting to get someone in to cover classes and then it's like, ugh, not such a great fit. So even if you as the owner, if have to pick up a few extra classes or something else, or maybe you even have to take a class or two off the schedule for a while until you can get a teacher. I just feel now after doing this for so long now, it's like better to slow it down than, and take the time in a situation like this. Or even if, you just need to add some staff I think the worst mistake you can make is when you're desperate and you're hiring out of desperation. And oftentimes too, we forget that sometimes if you just go to your team and say, hey team, this is what happened. I need these, can anybody, and perhaps people on your team will step up and say, yeah, I can cover these classes. Yeah, sure, I can cover this 6 a.m. class for a few weeks until you get somebody in here. Or sure, I can work an extra desk shift until, until you can hire someone to cover this shift. I have a client right now who's some out of desk on a Sunday, and so she went to, and they're like, well, yeah, I can't do it every Sunday, but if you want, so they worked it out with another couple of desk shift people so that they're all sort of like for the next month or so, each one of them is going to take a Sunday desk shift. Is it the best? No. However, at least it's like they're not racing to hire somebody as opposed to, hey, team. So again, you can get really creative with covering schedules and covering shifts by doing things like that. It's like, hey, I can fill in today, but Carol can fill in next week. And you just sort of have to patchwork it together for a period of time. Better to do that than get someone in and then have to deal with all the fallout at the end if it doesn't work out. And it might not even be for a reason such as this. It could just be that if they're not a good fit. And you don't know that because you've rushed to hire them and then you spend all this time training them and then 2 months later, it's like, oh God, this is just not right. And you've wasted, I mean, I don't know. Did you guys ever do something like that where you like hired someone in the hurry and we're like, oh shit, I shouldn't have done that?
Yeah, I was gonna say that woman that yelled at me that she doesn't like me. This was 2 years into our working relationship, and the first week I hired her, I got this little like tingle that I should not have hired her, and then held on to it for about 2 years because she was like, a great teacher in some ways, obviously not in all ways, because she was a little unhealthy, unstable, not kind, but she, brought a lot of people into her classes. I was going to ask you guys, do you get a little free coaching of my own here? We actually just lost 2 of our front desk staff, and they left really happy, but they left at the exact same time. And I have been toying with this question in my head as we're hiring someone new or someone's new. Is it better, and this goes for teaching staff too, to have fewer people who are really solid, committed, invested, so well trained, on brand? Obviously, you want that for all of your employees all the time. Or is it better to have more so that when people, one thing we do run into with our front desk staff is getting shifts covered. So where do you guys land on that?
I'll let Carol go.
This is the $1 million question.
Yeah.
I think it's I think I've run it both ways. And then you get, when you have really dedicated people, but a smaller, tighter staff, it is really difficult if somebody leaves. And if 2 of them leave at the same time, yikes, So I think what we landed on and what felt best to us is we had more people doing fewer shifts so that they could cover other classes when needed. They were kind of still had availability. And, even those people covering fewer shifts can be very dedicated, so it's just, I think it's finding the right fit. This was really telling whenever we had, at one point, it's like, people need to be full-time teaching 8-10 classes a week. And then, wow, if they need to go on a 2-week sabbatical, it's like, then, and everyone else is stretched really thin because they're doing a full, week's worth of work too with their teaching schedule. So nobody can really fill in. So we found that if we kept people around, 4 classes a week, something like that, it's kind of easier for them to fill in here and there. They feel happy because they have time to take classes too. And so that's sort of where we landed. We shifted to fewer shifts, but more people. And even those people we found could be pretty dedicated for the most part. I don't know, Terry, what do you think?
Well, I think everything you said, 100%, and asterisks. I think it also depends on the studio, the size of the studio. Like, I have a client that has several full-time desk people because they need it. They work full-time. They are employed full-time. They get benefits, and so it really is their sole professional job, right? So if you have a studio that is big enough, either you have a couple of rooms, you have a couple of locations, and you can have someone that, as a teacher, yeah, I can work full time for you between, there's enough. But because if you're at that level, then there's probably more. You have a few teachers that are full time, but then you also have teachers that are in that 4 to 5 classes that can cover when someone goes away on vacation. So I think there's a balance to be found based upon the size of the studio, right? A smaller studio might be where you might want to have a smaller, a few more teachers teaching some classes. I don't know, I'm not saying this very well. I mean, we get to the point too where you don't want to have let's say you have 30 classes a week on the schedule, but you have 15 teachers, each teaching 2 classes a week. That can get, then it's almost too unwieldy. So there is that sweet spot. And we talk about it. It's like having a core group of teachers that is in that maybe 4 to 6 classes, like a core group, a secondary group that is like the 1 to 2 classes, and then even a tertiary group, which would be teach the sound bath once a month, or they can fill in. I think the issue is becoming, when could you have people to fill in? Now, one thing to think about with desk staff too is if you really are stuck, if you have a teacher that, a lot of teachers, they should be trained on the desk as well. It's like, hey, I have a client who has one of her teachers is also on desk staff. She doesn't desk her own classes, but she teaches, I think, 4 classes a week, and she works like 4 desk shifts a week. So between those two, she's able to almost work full time.
Yeah.
And then she can pick up classes to sub as a teacher. She can pick up classes to sub as a desk shift. So in a situation where you might be down desk shift, is ask the teacher, say, hey, anybody want to pick up some extra hours and pay them just an hourly rate, whatever that is, an hourly rate. I need somebody to help out at the desk for this period of time. Anybody want to pick up a few extra bucks and cover some shifts at the desk?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's what my manager and I were talking about too, like, because we were talking about like hiring slow, which in this moment sounds like so scary because we have, all these shifts to cover. But, we were like, we really do want to stay, grounded and committed to finding the right fit. And that might mean, yeah, asking our teachers. Our teachers, they're all trained on the front desk. Are they the best salespeople on the planet? No. Is our studio going to survive having
Yes.
a non-perfect salesperson at the desk for a couple weeks? Yes, 100%. So
100%, yeah. It's I just suppose I was just going to say about the desk. I can't remember. God, man, I didn't sleep well last night. It's like I could tell my brain's a little foggy this morning. You were just saying about desk shifts. I can't. The thought is gone. It is just like. Oh, I know what I was going to say. This is why you should always be hiring.
100%.
It's like
Yeah.
you market when you're busy so you don't get slow. You hire when you're full staff so you don't in this position. So what I mean by that is have a join our team page on your website where you talk, and it's like, and you can have a form that pops to say, hey, we're not interested, whatever the positions are. Typically it's teacher front desk. These are the, interested in being part. We're not currently actively hiring, but if you're interested in blah, 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 we'll let you know. So you have a little form there that people put their name and email, phone number in, so that then if you do need to hire, you've got a list of people. Hey, Carol, I just want to let you know we are now hiring at the studio, kind of thing. So having that on your, join our team. I had a client that at the footer of every email, down there with all the social, it's like interested in joining our team with a link to the landing page where it was there. So that's the other thing, is just always actively, if you meet a teacher somewhere, in the community, and not that you're it's like, hey, if you're ever interested, we're not active, but if you're ever interested in coming to teach at my studio, please give me a call, blah, blah. Or if you run into somebody like has great customer service skills.
Totally.
And you're like, if you're ever interested in working at a yoga studio, we, at our front desk, we would love to have someone like you on our team, kind of thing. So here's my card, or here's how, if you're interested, let me know, blah, 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 that type of thing. So don't be afraid to reach out and market your studio to people you meet. It's like, hey, we'd love to have you. I love what you do here. And certain places like, certain stores that you go into and that they do a really good job at hiring and they've got really well-trained staff.
Yeah.
Like, have you ever had anybody at Trader Joe's? I mean, Trader Joe's staff are awesome. Even like Costco's staff is awesome. They really do a good job of hiring, right? So go to places that you like the service.
They probably do a good job of training too.
Training.
Yeah.
They do
Yeah, we do.
Training. Yeah.
Yeah, we do say we're always hiring for the right fit, which is true. Like if someone came in and was like, I really want a job and they were perfect, I'd be like, I'd find a random front desk shift for them. But I am missing the step, Terry, so I'm glad you said it, of just like keeping a really solid backlog, which we don't keep track of well enough right now. And so, yeah, I think that's a really good point.
Yeah, I think you can like have the page on the website, Bridget, and then have a wall of widget that like a lead that comes in or something like that. And then also just making sure you have a good job description and everything defined and what's the onboarding and the training and, all of that stuff. Yeah. Okay, wow. Anything else? We kind of covered the gamut.
Can't think of anything else. It's a great discussion today.
It was, yeah.
Let's just hope things sort of settle down for my.
No kidding.
Can we have a waxing or waning moon instead of a full moon now?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, let's just head back in the
Yeah,
other
it's just
direction.
been like crazy, but at client after client this week. It's just I mean, and it's just weird old stuff.
Totally. I got a
Whoa.
really, really, really mean email from a client that I like never get mean emails from a client. And the other night that I was told you guys the next day, I was like, we had a really weird day yesterday too. And this was when both my front desk people quit. And then I got that really mean email and I just cried so much at the end of the day. I was just like, I need to just cry. Like, this is just too much. This is a level that I can't today, but everything's fine now.
That's good. It all, as my mother always would say, and this day too shall pass.
Yeah. Amen.
Too shall pass. Okay. Well, I guess that's about it for this week's version of the weekly roundup. We're sorry we weren't able to come live. God knows, loves technology. When it works, it works. And when it doesn't, it doesn't. So thanks for tuning in. What do you do? Anything happen in your biz? What do you do? High or slow, fire fast? What are your processes? What are your procedures? Oh, and we're getting ready to launch, drum roll, the summit. So those of you that are listening that were there last year and put a deposit down, you've already heard from us. You guys get first dibs of the rooms and everything. And if you want to come to the summit, it is amazing experience. The whole team is there. You get your whole year planned out and have a whole bunch of fun. So stay tuned for the details on that. We'll be blasting that out here. If you're listening and you want to know the dates, we did push it. It is November 9th through the 14th. So the 9th through the 14th. And it's in Salilita, Mexico. It's super fun. Flying in out of PVR, Puerto Vallarta. And yeah, so put it on your calendars, plan on coming. And I think that's about it. So go do some yoga. Need any help? We're here. We're always available to chat and ask your questions. So be well, be safe, and we will see you in the YC.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.